Happy Independence Day. You may see fireworks in the sky as well as fireworks being added to Auburn's 2025 class.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's Recruiting Thursday with Brian Smith, Locked On recruiting expert, as well as the Auburn recruiting writer over at auburndaily.com. Recruiting coverage throughout Locked On is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire could feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Brian, we'll talk about the potential impact Juju Lewis could have and some names that might directly be impacted by that. Also, Auburn is in the hunt for a player expected to announce his decision this weekend. More on that coming up. But first things first, Hollis Davidson is expected to announce his decision today. Of course, the versatile tight end from Peachtree City, Georgia, was committed to Auburn, decommitted as he wanted to take a few visits, apparently not being committed somewhere. He said he didn't feel right about that. He's announcing, according to a post that he made on socials last week, he's planning to announce today.
That is a very important get for the Tigers. They need at least 2 tight ends in this class. And that's a kid that's versatile. He can catch it. He's a big body guy that can also play in line or be out in a flex position. Auburn needs this kid, and Florida State and several other programs are trying to get him, but I think Auburn's going to win the day over the Noles.
Yeah, I think so. So let's just have this conversation, assuming Hollis Davidson he commits to Auburn. What does this add? What does this add to the class? So obviously Auburn has Ryan G committed, the other tight end. They seem to be pretty different, which I'm sure is part of the strategy here.
Yeah, you need to have versatility. If you want to go 22 personnel, play power football, you need an inline guy. I think G's probably the better blocker, but at the same time, Hollis is not little by any stretch of the imagination either. So you could do different things with them in terms of playing one in the slot or use one at the goal line to be a guy that catches a fade ball. They're both good players. So, and last year they didn't get a tight end. So now you're in a situation where you get 2 big body guys that kind of helps change things. Dio's going to leave. Fairweather's going to leave. You need to. They might even still take a guy in the portal, but they needed 2 really good players, and they hit their home run if they get this young man.
Yeah. So Hollis Davidson, 6'6", 230 pounds, really solid frame. You like his athleticism.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a path to playing time early for Hollis? I know we spoke highly of him when he was committed the first time. I can't imagine a whole lot has changed.
No, I think it's pretty obvious. One or both of them will play at least some as a freshman, barring them just taking a couple kids in the portal randomly, which I doubt. And I think they have to play. Like, Auburn's depth chart is not completely void after this year, but you're going to lose your top 2 guys. It's open. The 3rd spot on the depth chart, one of them concedes, and you're going to play there.
Tight end is fascinating with what they're going to do. So you lose Luke Deal, you lose Brandon Frazier, and then, of course, Rivaldo Fairweather. Those guys are gone. And so if the roster stays as it is, Micah Riley, Rico Walker, and then the guys that are in this class, presumably Hollis Davidson and Ryan G. I think you do add another tight end in the portal, unless you're telling these guys that you're not.
The only way, that's risky. 4 is pretty risky when 2 are freshmen. Not having played in the SEC and not having gone through an off-season conditioning program, like to be able to block on the edge in the SEC, to run outside zone and stuff, that is man strength. That is not just out of high school strength. So that's hard. And then there's also the point where if you take a guy out of the portal, maybe you take an H-back, a 6'2", 240-pound kid out of Princeton or something.
Sure.
Just to run those kind of plays. They're not going to be threatened by that, because that's more of a fullback role that maybe he plays a little bit of tight end. That's my guess. Those guys are still a need, and Auburn wants to play downhill football. But you got your 2 athletes out of the high school ranks. They just, you just need seasoning.
Right.
But it's thin at 4. It's thin.
Do you think this recruiting battle means a little bit more the fact that, okay, Hollis Davidson was committed, he decommits to visit elsewhere. FSU, it seems like FSU tried to make a run at him, and then we're assuming he chooses Auburn today. Brian, holding off a team, a program like FSU, how do you think that comes into play here?
Well, that's a team that, depending on who you ask, should have made the playoff last year. It's a team that won every game in the regular season. It's Florida State. It's a team you recruit against constantly in the state of Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. There are a lot of implications. And this is a kid from the northern part of Georgia. That's Auburn's base. You have to win those battles against schools that, quite honestly, you're trying to compete with to get into the playoff. If you don't get that player, you got to play against him. So that's how I look at it. It's a win all around. It's very, very important they get this kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like they're going to. So Hollis Davidson, certainly the name to watch today on July 4th. But assuming Auburn lands him, they kind of got some negative pub. I'm a big believer of perception is reality when it comes to recruiting. And I think adding Hollis Davidson back when so many people kind of poked at Auburn when they lost his commitment, I think that'll be big. He's listed a 3-star in everywhere but Rivals. Rivals has him as a 4-star. Where are you as far as where he should be ranked?
4-star.
You
guys
think
that make
4-star
plays, good? Yeah, because guys that make plays at his size after the catch are not normal. Like, he can make guys miss. And I'm not saying he's going to make 7 guys miss on a punt return, but
sure,
he can make the first guy miss, and he can get away from linebackers and safeties. At his size, if you can do that, you can be a serious threat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I'm a versatile tight end, we've seen versatile tight ends be drawn to what Hugh Freeze is offering. I mean, since he's been here, they got Rivaldo Fairweather. Hollis Davidson is going to be part of that. It seems like they went out and got Rico Walker in the transfer portal this offseason. I mean, you got to think anytime Freeze is talking to one of these guys, the way they used Evan Ingram in Ole Miss has to come up. It has to.
That's exactly what I would say. And Fairweather here. I mean, like, he had a pretty good year last year. And this is, is Ingram, I don't know if he's the same guy that is, but it's the same style. Right. And if you're going to be in Auburn's offense now, since they're getting receivers, they can't pick one guy. I mean, Fairweather could have a huge year for the Tigers this season because, okay, let's be honest, there's a certain guy named Coleman that's going to help draw attention away.
Sure.
That's going to be the norm now moving forward. Auburn's going to have a receiving threat that can go deep. You're going to be single covered all the time. It's going to be a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, especially if the scheme can work like we think it can. And you're Hollis Davidson, 6'6", 230. You're either being covered by a nickel or a safety who's going to be shorter than you and smaller than you, probably 30 or 40 pounds lighter than you. I mean, it's just a mismatch waiting to happen if you can figure out how to use him at the next level. It's very, very exciting when you look at what Hollis can bring. So
absolutely.
Yep. All right, Auburn could potentially add more folks this weekend. We discuss what that looks like in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at GameTime. GameTime is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for a sporting event, whether it's for a concert, whether it's for the theater. It doesn't matter what it is. If you need a ticket for it, GameTime has you covered. They're an authorized ticket marketplace for the MLB, which means getting tickets faster and easier is totally a thing. And prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch or kickoff, depending on what sport we're talking about. So be sure to check them out. They've got flash deals. They got priority last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Brian, when you look at this weekend for the Tigers, Jacobe Ward, he has set his decision for the 6th. So that is Saturday. And everywhere you look, it seems like Auburn is the clear favorite. He put out his top 3. It was Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee. And it just doesn't really seem to be like there's a whole lot of buzz outside of Auburn about Jacoby Ward.
I'd spoken to his coach earlier this spring, and we both agreed that in a pinch, he could be your tackle, but he's definitely a guy that's a road grader at guard. Auburn was on him very heavily at that point, and they have been all the way through. The entire offensive line staff in that room just really like him. They check in with him all the time, and he's been high on Auburn from the outset. It's the one constant school. Mm-hmm. Tennessee's been another one. LSU got heavier involved as it went on, but I think this one's going to go to Auburn, and it's just due to the effort they put in because they built relationships with him. And by the way, He's 6'4", about 330 pounds, give or take. This is a true road grader on the interior, and that's something that Auburn needs. They're starting to hit a lot more on the offensive lineman. They've got 4 committed already. They could take him, maybe even one more, and get 6 in this class. So, like you always say, Zach, offensive line, you can't have enough of them because Auburn certainly struggled with that for a long time.
No kidding. Yeah, 6'4", over 320, 330 pounds. And like you said, he moves well. This is a guy that you want to be part of your class. 3-star across the board, you don't care. You don't care. This is a guy that makes your team better. You pair him on the interior with Ty Buster, who's part of this class, and you start to think about 2 or 3 years from now, that could be a really, really impressive tandem inside.
That's what you're looking for. They're getting their guys that they want, that fit their scheme, and they're guys that can move in space. They want mobility. I think with the RPO game, is Auburn's going to be really heavy with that, with Coach Freeze and his staff. These guys can move in space. So here you go. You found them. Go get them and make them great players.
You've talked about Savannah being a place where there's talent that comes out of there, and it's usually underrated because nobody goes to Savannah. Assuming this falls into that from your perspective, would you say?
100%. That high school had Luke Cromahawk last year, and he was the quarterback assigned with Florida State. The linebacker guy that just signed with Miami over Auburn is from there. Just that school alone has 2 or 3 guys a year, and there's a couple other programs as well. And then arguably the best defensive lineman in the country this year, Elijah Griffin, is from there. That everybody recruiting him, but that area it's just so remote. Nobody goes through there, and that's unfortunate. But that's why they're not ranked as high most of the time.
Yeah. So Jacobe Ward would be a fun addition to this class. So we saw them lose Carday Smith last week, and obviously I think Smith was probably going to be a tackle. The ability to scoot inside the guard if asked, but I think most of us saw him as a tackle. So assuming Ward commits this weekend, I mean, you look at it, and they've got a nice mix of folks that can play tackle and can play guard.
Yeah, I think that it's finally to the point where Auburn's going to have something that you're not used to saying. They've got balance on the offensive line.
Unbelievable.
Because especially tackle. I mean, I know Ward's more than likely going to play guard, but like tackle there for a while was just like, do we have enough?
Right.
Like, there wasn't a depth chart. So you had guys that were probably better at guard playing at tackle because they didn't have any other options. Now, like Roderick Scholl's a tackle. You know what I mean? Like they're in a good spot.
And Dice is a tackle, right?
Like both those guys, either one could play left, and I'd be okay with it. They're in a great spot, and they're still in on a couple guys. We'll see, Malachi, etc. They could play guard or tackle, whatever. But even if you just finish with Ward and get a 5-man class like this, when was the last time Auburn had a 5-man offensive line class? Has there been one in your lifetime that you're like,
not where they've been built out of high school kids? Probably not. It's
unbelievable for a program like Auburn. I mean, it really is.
You kidding me? We've been asking that question for the better part of a decade.
It's because usually when you miss on a year at a position, doesn't matter what one it is. If you're Auburn or an SEC school, it's not hard to sell anyway. But if you have playing time to add to the mix, so how do you do that for the better part of a decade? It's just amazing how
it is amazing. It is amazing. So if they finish the class with Broderick Scholl, offensive tackle Tavares Dice, and then I guess the other tackle is Spencer Dolan. I'm not quite positive he's a tackle at the SEC. We'll see. I know you're high on him, so that's great. And then Ty Buster, one of the guards, and then let's assume they add Jacoby Ward. I mean that's good enough, right? I think they want more. No question, and they're still not going to back off of some other guys, but that's a great spot to be in where that's like, okay, it's not best case scenario, but it's a pretty dang good one.
Not many schools will recruit a 5-man haul like that in any conference. It would be top 5 in the SEC conservatively this year is my guess, and more than likely they'll try to go get 4 more next year, I would assume, because once you get to this point, and then you can be a little pickier not to take as many, but you finally be back on track.
Could you make a 5-man line with those guys? Like, who would you put at center? I assume you'd scoot Dowland into guard, and then who would you move to center?
Buster.
Okay.
Yep.
Has he played center?
He plays guard for his high school team, but centers at the high school level is usually the 5'10" crazy kid. You know, that's kind of what it is. Like he's the Friday night guy. He's not going to play tackle for you, but okay, man, you're the 5th guy. You just got to get it to the quarterback. So
Gotcha.
But Buster can move. So I still think he can pull and trap and stuff. But he's the shortest guy, so he's most likely to play center.
Some of this we're about to get into, but if Auburn were to add these two guys that we've talked about today, that put them at 16 commits early in July. We've talked about Juju being a possibility, and we'll talk about the impact Juju could have. But like, how many, like at some point, do you worry about pacing, or do you just say, no, let's just get everybody in here and let's just go ahead and finish out the class as soon as possible?
Well, the problem with that is the elite kids know they're the elite kids, and they can have fun on visits. This will never change. It's the last time they have leverage. They decide when they want, no matter how much it angers coaches. And that means November and December. So there's always going to be 3 to 5 kids that you're trying to get. You know, Auburn's never going to give up on like Justice Terry. There's a ton of receivers we're going to be talking about, Caleb Cunningham, etc. Those guys are going to make late decisions.
Okay. Yep. All right, let's jump into that. If Juju does flip, who else could come with him? That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. All right, let's just dream for a second. And I still think Auburn is in a great spot to flip Juju Lewis. Despite kind of the ups and downs over the last few weeks, I still think they're in it for him. So let's assume they do. Because I've talked about the impact of landing Juju Lewis. It's bigger than just landing Juju. It's the marketing, it's the messaging, it's the, okay, hey, we have another major part of our sales pitch that we need to make sure everybody that we talk to knows moving forward that Juju Lewis is part of Auburn's class. Who are some guys in your mind, Brian, that if Juju Lewis does flip from USC to Auburn, Auburn's chances of landing drastically increase?
Let's start with Caleb Cunningham, the wide receiver out of Mississippi. Look, he's like 20 minutes from Mississippi State. That's pretty local, but at the same time, how good is Mississippi State? How their season goes is going to be a part of this. But he's a 5-star kid. He named Auburn his leader at one point after a visit. And he's the kind of guy that if he played on the same field with Perry and with Cam, good night. Because he's 6'2", 6'3". He's another guy that's like, he's the kind of kid you throw alley-oops to on a basketball court.
Sure.
Special player. That's first kid that comes to mind. They're in the hunt anyway.
Yeah.
But that's without a star quarterback in the class.
Yeah. He picked up a crystal ball to Alabama, 2 weeks ago. And so it seems like they're the favorite to land them now. But if you get Juju, it changes that pitch a little bit.
Well, that's right after they got Keelan Russell, the quarterback that won Elite 11. Juju was right behind him there. Anytime you get a quarterback, receivers look at it a little differently. A few of the other kids, this is probably the other big one. He's committed to Bama, is Derek Smith out of Southside in Selma, Alabama. He is a freak. I'm sure that battle was going to happen all the way through regardless, but Auburn's been after him. They're trying to get him, come to the Big Cat Weekend, etc. That's an important recruitment. Travis Smith out of Westlake High School. It's the same high school as a certain guy that won the Heisman in 2010 that you're pretty familiar with. He's a great player. Georgia's after him hard, but again, Auburn doesn't have a quarterback yet, and they're still in the running. He's another big-bodied kid that's really good.
Okay.
CJ Wiley, kid that surprised everybody, committed to Florida State over Georgia, Auburn, and some others. I still think he's in play for other schools. Again, he shocked everybody by picking Florida State. That's a kid that knows Juju. That's a kid that is from the Atlanta area. That's another possibility. Then there's a couple other random guys like Jamie French or Dallas Wilson, some of these other guys nationally that live in Florida or in the South. If you get Juju, don't be surprised if somebody like that visits. It's just part of it because everybody knows who he is. They've either played with him or played against him in 7-on-7. They know that guy. So he's going to have an impact that you cannot put into perspective until it actually happens.
Yeah. Do you think it impacts, defensive players? So I know you mentioned, Justice just a second ago, but does it impact? I mean, it impacts everybody, right? It's not just receivers. I mean, the total impact of a quarterback it's huge.
Everybody wants to win. I'll talk to Justice about it when I go see him in practice in August, but Justice Terry, in my opinion, is the best overall prospect in the country. He's from Manchester, Georgia. Just a great kid. Yes, sir, no, sir. And then he runs over you and kills your quarterback. He's the guy you want up front.
Yeah.
Auburn's been trying to get him forever, but so's everybody. If Auburn gets Juju, a kid that, again, he knows he lives like an hour and something from Juju. They know each other. That's going to impact him. It's same thing with all the kids in the Alabama, Georgia area, especially because that's where he's played 7 on most. Any of those kids, you're more likely to be in the mix. Corner, DB, receive, whatever. It doesn't matter. He makes a difference because everybody talks about him. He's been on the radar since he's 7th, 8th grade year. Mm-hmm. He's been around that long, so all these kids know him.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be huge. It would be. So do you think some of the other quarterbacks that are kind of been thrown out there, if Auburn misses on Juju, like does a KJ Lacey have that cachet or pull, or like Deuce Knight's been a name that I've heard. I don't know if I fully buy that one, but Deuce Knight's been thrown out there. Do those guys have that like level of cachet, or would it just kind of be just another quarterback in that case?
KJ would have cachet in Southern Alabama and to a certain extent throughout the state. He's won a state title. He's been recruited by Auburn, Alabama, et cetera. He's committed to Texas. I mean, he's good. But Juju's just been on the radar longer. Deuce is elevated, but he's from a small school in Mississippi. He's committed to Notre Dame, and I think that's where he's going to go, but he's got a bigger name. He's a freak athlete with a 42-plus inch vertical, but I don't know if anybody has more than Juju.
Yeah.
So he's just been around on the scene for so long that all these kids know him.
Where are you with buying all the Juju to Auburn hype? I know I used to ask you that every week. It's been a minute since I've asked you that.
I was off of it there for a little bit, but then all the kids decommitted from USC in the East. Like, I don't know what happened. They lost 3 kids in a row. Like, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, man, that is not good, because one of the things Juju wanted to see, from what I was told, if I'm going to go to SC, they got to stop some people, because last year their defense, again, sucked. Mm-hmm. You only really cure that by getting elite players, and especially in the trenches, they suck. They're not getting them. So I think they're in trouble there, and maybe he still ends up there because he just wants to play in Lincoln Riley's offense, and I get it.
Sure.
They're not winning no title until they completely change their defensive recruiting. They have no shot.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like they've done that. So
their win total is pretty similar to Auburn's. It's 7.5, I think, something like that. I mean,
USC's is?
Yeah. Their schedule's really hard, but I mean, this USC, this is the third year. You know what I mean? Like, this is when you should be going up, not down.
Right.
But they just can't get the defensive players.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see how it all goes down, because, I mean, it's got to happen somewhat soon. It's got to happen I don't know if it's Big Cat weekend or not, but it's got to be sometime in the next month and a half, whether he's locking it down or saying he's USC or whatever, because USC needs to know too. I know they feel confident,
100%.
but they need to know as well. So at some point it's going to come to an end, and he's going to make his decision, and we'll see what Auburn does to react to that. They'll either react and be excited and go out and try to get some of these big name guys that you just said, or they'll react and pivot to another quarterback. We'll see.
That's the nature of the beast, man. Quarterback, it's musical chairs when a kid decommits. It sends things in a circle.
Sure. Brian, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
auburndaily.com and at FBScout_Florida on X. We're in commitment season, and we're right on the edge of SEC Media Day, so there's a lot to talk about.
Yes, so exciting. Be sure to like the video. Please subscribe. We will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.